Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. Today we're going to be talking about shoplifting because research shows that shoplifting is on the rise and the public seem to be increasingly fed up of it. To discuss this, I'm joined by a shop owner in Wrexham called Rob Davies and Ian Acheson, who formerly worked in the Home Office and writes for The Spectator. Now, Ian, I'd like to go to you first, if that's okay. You wrote for The Spectator this week about shoplifting being on the rise and why it's become so out of control. Could you tell us about what the problem is and what the data suggests?
The data is pretty awful, to be fair. So what we've seen are 500,000 offences, more or less, recorded by police over the last year. That's a 20% increase year on year. And even considering those dire statistics, there's lots of data to say about a third of crime, shop theft, isn't reported to police at all, because what's the point as far as people like Rob and other shopkeepers are concerned? It is virtually expanded to a point where you might as well say this is almost state-sponsored looting. And the crazy thing that happened to Rob, encapsulates what's happening here in relation to trust in our institutions to deal with the problem. I'll probably, I'll stop there but to say, something about where I think this rot started. And that is when our old friends, the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing, who in 2023 basically legitimized shop theft by releasing a strategy that said the police would not typically investigate shop theft that didn't involve violence and that was of a figure of £200 or less. Now they're trying desperately the government's trying desperately to reverse that. But that's where the rot started, and that's why you get situations where criminal impunity is exploding across our town centres, and there seems to be no way of dealing with it apart from these expressions of total frustration from Rob and others that I completely understand.
Well, Ian, I want to bring Rob in because you are familiar with his story, but not everyone is. So, Rob, please, could you tell our viewers what happened to you recently in your shop?
Good afternoon, guys. Yeah, absolutely. As you say, the level of frustration for me just got to a fever pitch. I just got to the stage where, what am I doing? Why am I doing this anymore? I can't seem to get any help. I have no support. And as an independent trader, you're very isolated and feel very alone a lot of the time and vulnerable. And as large as I am and upfront as I am, I had to do something. So I decided after much thought to put a note on my cabinets because most of my customers were used to coming in and having looked through the cabinets. I like to rummage through cabinets myself, but I couldn't allow that to continue. So I put on my cabinets a nicely worded note saying, due to scumbags shoplifting, please ask for assistance to look in the cabinets. Thank you. That was up for a short period, week and a half. And then I had a police officer come in saying that a lady had spoken to him in the town centre saying that my sign was provocative and potentially offensive. So when I asked the police officer to whom could it be offensive, he couldn't really answer, but I already knew the answer to that. Only people who were going to shoplift from me. It could be offensive to, and if that offends them, tough. I don't care. I'm not bothered if you're offended if you're a shoplifter, because you offend me by coming in my shop and stealing my livelihood. So the signs went up. And local media picked up on it, and then it's just gone global. And you might think that's an exaggeration, but if you have the likes of J.D. Vance commenting on it in the news recently, when asked a question, if you have the likes of your own Prime Minister having to comment on it over the last week, if you're having people from all over the world phoning you in support of you, and literally from all over the world, I think the only country I haven't had from so far is Russia, but he's a bit busy at the moment, so I'll let him off. So it's just got to the stage with a lot of shopkeepers that we feel very, very isolated and vulnerable. So, for instance, in Wrexham, what I advocate is we're setting up a WhatsApp group, which is totally free of charge, end-to-end encrypted, so that saves your data. The only people that can be on it are those invited. And what it does is it gives everybody the platform and media free of charge to talk to each other, send the relevant messages, photographs, videos, voicemails, connect with CCTV locally, and then they can track the perpetrators of crime.
And you said at the beginning it's reached a fever pitch, Rob. how long have you had your shop for, and has it definitely risen, or is it just a matter of everyone's now talking about it?
No, I've had the shop for 5 years in the present situation that I'm in. Shoplifting never really was that much of a problem. But then I started to notice more and more disappearing. As I've said before, one of the saddest sights that I see in my shop is first thing in the morning. I walk in my shop and I straighten everything up. The saddest thing I see in my shop sometimes is an empty coat hanger because I know that I've been stolen from.
That's very sad.
And even if you're only losing what to a lot of people might not be a large amount, say £200 in a month, that might be the only money that I draw from my business for that month,
Yeah.
after paying everything and my bills and the restock. But also the public need to understand that it's not just me that's the victim, they're the victim too, because indirectly they pay for the theft, because I've got to recoup that somewhere. So the public are being targeted with this as well. So it's not a one victim crime. Everybody's the victim in this.
I want Rob, one more question for you, but I also have I want Ian to answer it as well. A lot of people talk about, and I think you mentioned this in an interview yourself, that it's the cost of living. Money is tight right now, so a lot of people need to shoplift because they need to make ends. They need food and stuff. But actually, I think I've noticed a rise in petty shoplifting from the middle class people. Anecdotally, I know someone who shoplifts and has proudly said to me that she saves £20 per week on her food. So do you think, Rob, that it's a problem of money being tight, or is it just a habitual thing and almost a trend, really?
I mean, for me personally, I can see that some people, it's what they do. It's habitual for them. I've always made the differentiation by, if you're going out and you're stealing to feed your family, that's one thing. But nobody can eat a pair of socks or a funky shirt. Nobody needs what I sell. They buy it because they like it. They buy it because it's the missing piece of their collection. Or they want a funky shirt because they're doing a 1970s night. Well, if you're going to a 1970s night and can afford to go, then you don't need to steal from me. You need to pay your way. So if somebody is in dire need of food to feed their family, don't steal from me to sell it on. Let me know. I'll buy you some food.
Absolutely.
I won't give you the money, but I'll buy you food. I'll help you.
Ian, over to you. What do you think? Because Iceland, for example, the head of it, Richard Walker, has announced that they've lost 20 million a year from shoplifting.
Well, I think, again, we need to look at the data, and the data is really consistent over time and from different sources. And that says that typically 60 to 75% of shop theft offences are committed by people who are addicted to either heroin or crack cocaine or other forms of drugs. So the theft is largely being driven by addiction. Now, whether that theft is through organised crime involvement or individuals, this is the driver. And this is why I've said repeatedly that what we need is a criminal justice response to this that actually takes addiction into account. So what I'd like to see, and actually this would have the benefit of emptying the prisons of people for whom the experience only makes them worse. I mean, 50% of people going into prison without an addiction to drugs come out with one. So prison is not the right place. But community punishments for this sort of crime isn't effective either. What we need is some sort of secure NHS addiction treatment that is compulsory, attached to a sentence for this kind of crime. So you're breaking that model, if you like. Now, it's not a panacea, but I think it would be a major start. And the other thing I just want to say is, you've talked about Iceland, Natasha. You've also talked about middle class, proclivity to just steal things because it's not doing any harm. I'm really interested in the communities that I come from, the community that I was born in, a working class community, and the impact that shop theft has on that. Because unlike the places most middle class criminologists go to, the Waitroses of this world, the little corner shop in the deprived neighborhood can't afford, and I'm sure Rob would say the same thing, although he's got a different clientele, can't afford a security guard or CCTV or any of the typical deterrents that big corporates can afford. So what happens in those places? Those shops fold and they close down because their margins are so small they cannot tolerate the looting effectively that's going on in them. And you send those communities further into a spiral of decline, and they become places that people want to get out of, not make a life in. And I accept that Wrexham's probably not like that, Robert, most of it. But I mean, that is the key thing. We are abandoning people, marooning them in postcodes, or criminal impunity seems to run riot, and faith in the state to do something about it is declining. That is an exceptionally dangerous place to get us into with all the other community tensions that we've got at the moment.
And equally, Ian, even when you talk about shoplifting in some of the big corporations, a lot of people would justify it and say it's redistributing wealth. But should this 20 million black hole continue in Iceland, it's not going to be the people at the top of the chain who are going to be losing their jobs. It's the people in the lowest pecking order, with the lowest income, that will be the ones losing out. So in both cases, it's wrong. Rob, I wanted to come on to you here. What happened when you told the police about the thefts?
Well, the first time that I rang them, an officer eventually came out, and the upshot was he handed me back the shirt that the guy had stolen and basically told the guy to go on his way. The subsequent 4 times that I rang after that, they didn't even come out. During COVID, for instance, when I couldn't be at my shop all the time, somebody tried to break in through the roof of my shop, causing over £1,000 worth of damage to the roof, and well over £1,000 worth of damage to stock because of water ingress, because I wasn't there at the shop during COVID. How quiet was it in my town over COVID? It was silent, pin drop silent. I'm sure they would have heard slates coming off the roof if they got out of their car and patrolled properly as they should have done. But I'm getting no support, or up to now I've had no support off the police. Suddenly, I now have what they want, a close working relationship with me. They've now set up a token pop-up shop in the town that's there every now and again. They're telling me that there will be increased police officers in the town centre. I've yet to see it. It's all platitudes until they actually do something. And until that happens, we're still isolated, we're still on our own, and we're still running on minimal funding. It's got to stop. Something's got to change.
And in Bournemouth, for example, they've set up a sort of vigilante. The public are taking matters into their own hands, and they're going to start patrolling the streets themselves because they don't trust the police anymore. What do you think about that?
I think it's a very dangerous line to tread. Potentially dangerous for the vigilante, potentially dangerous for us. They may have the vigilante group may have their own agendas. So I think it's a very, very, very dangerous line to tread. I mean, speaking to people over the last 2 weeks, I had a gentleman contact me saying that he was looking to get 20 fellas together to go to France in groups of 5 for their own safety and cut the rubber boats before they get off the beach. So people are going to the extreme of thinking along those sort of lines. That's quite dangerous. And it's dangerous for the country, not just for the individuals that might come out and be vigilantes. So I wouldn't advocate vigilante action in that respect. I think we need to give the powers that be 5 minutes, give them a little bit of time to start acting on things because it's now been highlighted. And if they don't, then the public eventually may take it into their own hands.
And Ian, what do you think? Obviously, Reform are making waves in politics at the moment, and Nigel Farage says he's going to go after every crime, no matter how petty it is. So shoplifting has come under the spotlight in part because of his announcements. Do you think Reform are making the right types of noises?
Oh, I think this is a very attractive message to give to potential voters, for sure. I mean, what's wrong with saying we need to investigate every crime? I think one of the problems that we have, and I want to come back to vigilantism, if I may, in a minute, but one of the problems we have in relation to promises about policing crime is a collapse in police numbers. And we're seeing more and more cops who've just been trained, not lasting very long before they resign because of the moral injury of being asked to do far too much with far too little, and because of the corrosive effects of social media, which is having a real impact on police recruitment and retention. And I can only see that getting worse. But just in relation, if I may, to vigilantism, one of the reasons we have a criminal justice system is to replace the law of vigilantism, which existed hundreds of years ago. Before we had agents of the state and institutions who were supposed to look after public safety. So I'm absolutely not in favour of vigilantism in any means at all. I think it's the road to ruin, frankly. But I can understand why these things are happening in places like Bournemouth, which towns that feel that they've been denuded of proper public safety policing. And the only person you see in authority in downtown Bournemouth, apart from maybe policing the nighttime economy, is a traffic enforcement officer. So the abstraction of policing from communities is a really serious problem. And it's not a very sexy answer, frankly, saying we need to get policing back into communities. But it is actually the only way to turn around and reverse the problem of criminal impunity that we see now, and the absolute disconnect that we are seeing, particularly in poor communities, between behaviour and consequence. So, Feroze is probably right to say police all the crimes. But, who do we do it with? How do we get those policing numbers back up? How are they directed back into communities? How do we, frankly, get rid of a whole tranche of police chiefs who are more, it seems, interested in emoting about progressive, fashionable ideologies than they are about protecting community safety, and who completely misunderstand, frankly, the dynamics of community safety when it comes to protecting, communities from crimes like shoplifting. So that's the issue. How do we actually recruit and retain people to work in law enforcement and support them in a way that the public want to bear down on crimes that are torturing Rob and driving him to some of the things that he's done.
Lastly, Rob, are you persuaded by the Reform Party based off some of the announcements they've made in terms of tackling crime?
Well, they're not in power, so they can announce what they want. It's actual action that makes a difference. So again, it's just platitudes. I could say anything that I want about any situation and not act. And if I don't act upon it, then it's just a waste of time. So, I take no notice until I no longer take any notice until something actually happens. Unfortunately, I'm not a believer in the political system in this country because it doesn't seem to work properly for the people that it's supposed to. But if they say that they're going to do that and they actually get into power and they do it, all credit to them. Well done. But I'm yet to be convinced. I will wait and see.
Well, best of luck with your shop run ragged. Hopefully anyone that visits Wrexham will go and see your shop. Thank you for joining us on Spectator TV, Rob, and thank you, Professor Ian Acheson.